Hello, my dear subscribers and viewers. Welcome to Superpower Broadcasting. I'm Kevin, and in this video, I would like to lay out for you a vision of the Libertarian agenda for America. Now, my friend Reese of Nightmare Fuel did a video exposing the cultishness of the Libertarians a while back, and he spent some time going over one libertarian's obsession with the texts and the moments that inspired them to become a libertarian, and he likened it to a of religious fundamentalism. And of course, with libertarianism, there is this imbued sense of divine truth, this sense of scriptural and infallible doctrine that's associated and attributed to figures such as Ayn Rand, Rand dumber than Jake Paul, Ron dumber than Jake Paul, and a few others. Paul Ryan, of course, being another noteworthy one. The thing is, the libertarians, when we look at their doctrine, when we look at their texts, when we look at the precepts that they claim to believe in, what we see is this stark chasm between that and what they actually espouse and what they actually hold in their sensibilities, generally speaking. Now, there are some libertarians that will fall outside of this agenda that I'm going to be laying out here, but most of them will not, and most of them will be sympathetic or get behind this. Whether they admit it publicly or not, we should be aware of what their intention and their goal for America is. And, well, there are libertarians in other countries in the West. There are libertarians in Canada. We can see some very, very highly cringeworthy examples, and in the case being, of course, lackluster Lawrence Southern. We've got, this crazy dude, Maxime Bernier. These are two particular libertarians out of Canada. Lackluster Lawrence Southern is probably the most cringeworthy that I can think of. But we have them in the United Kingdom as well. We have them in France. We have them in Germany. But there is an American brand of libertarianism that is just much more imbued with this sense of scriptural and divine doctrine. And what we're going to be looking at, and what I'm going to be guiding you through here, is a potential history going forward for America if we are ever stupid enough to ultimately surrender power to these people and to forfeit the republic to these people. So I hope that you will find this both to some extent entertaining, because it is a goofy thing that they want. But also I hope that you will take this to heart and understand that libertarianism is not something to fool around with. It is not something that is just this benign or boring or, unharmful substance that you can just kind of fool around with or whatnot. That there is actually a very pernicious element to it, and that there is this very dark and insidious agenda by the libertarians for America. And I say America in particular here because even though there are the others, the agenda that I'm going to be laying out here applies particularly to the United States. Now, if you have read the books, The Hunger Games, or if you have seen the films of The Hunger Games, or if you have done both, then you will see much that is analogous to what I'm going to be laying out here. And ultimately what this comes down to is that stark difference that I mentioned earlier, that I alluded to, between what their texts claim and what they actually believe and what their sensibilities actually are, is ultimately going to produce, if we give them power, a world, a country that looks as similar to those libertarian texts as the Soviet Union looked to the utopia that Marx laid out. In other words, there will be some symbolic and aesthetic and rhetorical acknowledgments and lip service paid to the scriptural texts and core ideological doctrine. But at the end of the day, it's going to become, in essence, a fascist dictatorship. Now, how can that happen, you might ask? How can libertarianism lend itself to authoritarianism? Because right off the bat, they seem opposites. Well, if you've studied Marxism, as I've done, you would know that Marxism is actually an anarchist in its ultimate state of form. The utopia that it envisions is actually anarchist. It seeks a world devoid of the state, in which workers organize collectively but organically, and where there is no sort of hierarchical structure. The path, of course, to get there involves, as Marx laid out, the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is supposed to be, in his teleology, this temporary stage between capitalism, socialism, and then communism. But of course, that's the rub there, right? Is that, well, how do you ever get out of the dictatorship of the proletariat? No dictator will ever relinquish power. They will consolidate power. And so that's why you never get to that anarchistic state. And we've seen this dozens of times tried throughout history. Well, the libertarians haven't had the same number of experiments. They haven't been given so much power over so many billions of people as the communists have. But I can assure you that a libertarian utopian society would look much the same way as a communist utopian society. It would look like communist China. It would look like Stalin's Soviet Union. It would not be this Ayn Randian social Darwinistic paradise or whatever, as they would claim. It would not be this free market endeavor. It would even go past the level of monopoly. Now, one argument I've seen levied against libertarianism, which I believe, of course, is that if you have a free market with no regulatory bodies, it will consolidate into a monopoly, a series of monopolies, and no longer be a free market. But the vision that I'm laying out here is not just corporate tyranny. That's an element of it. But I'm arguing that with a libertarian country, you would see a profound big government and big state apparatus, secret police, etc. Much the same way as you would with communism. Even though communism is this anti-statist ideology, the states that paid the most lip service to communism, such as the USSR, or Enver Hoxha's Albania, or Kim Il-sung's North Korea, they were the most statist. They were the most authoritarian and totalitarian systems. And so North Korea remains so today. I would argue that they are the worst dictatorship in history, at least on a per capita basis. If we're looking at the effect on the country in particular, they're the worst of the worst. They took what Stalin did and they amplified it to an extent that he couldn't have even dreamed of. And so when we see the libertarian view of things, when we see their version, their sort of equivalent in all of this, what we're going to see, of course, is, just as we saw in the Soviet Union, this pretense of fighting for the proletariat and this sense of fighting for freedom from capitalism. What we will see in a libertarian totalitarian system is this pretense, this lip service paid to the idea of liberty, and this lip service paid to the idea of free markets. But at the end of the day, and in reality, it will look nothing like that, just as Stalinism looked nothing like the utopia that Marx envisioned. Now, I'm not a Marxist apologist. I'm not a Marxist. I despise Marx because he was fully comfortable with having that dictatorship of the proletariat stage. He was naive. He should have known what would have happened. His views got hundreds of millions of people not only executed, but billions of people lived in misery because of communism. I mean, few people have done so much disservice to humanity as one person, as Marx, right? But if the libertarians were ever given the same opportunity, you can betcha, they might even beat that kill count, it is possible. And if you're skeptical, if you're doubting at this point, why I might draw a similar comparison between authoritarian communism and make the case that libertarianism would be authoritarian. Let's just look at a microcosm of what libertarians espouse today. What do they claim? Well, they have a stark difference between their domestic views and their foreign policy, their international views. So libertarians, and I talk about this on this channel, of course, if you're subscribed and have seen my previous work, you would know that I point this out from time to time. It's oftentimes the libertarians that are the most quick to defend brutal dictators around the world. That seems goofy. How could a system that is supposed to be fundamentally based around this idea of individual liberty, how could anybody that believes in that, to such an extent, mind you, that any taxation is seen as theft, how could those people ever support jackboots in Syria going around and executing people for wanting freedom of expression, free speech, democracy? How could you ever support that as a libertarian? But as we see, the two most prominent libertarians in American politics, Ron dumber than Jake Paul, Rand dumber than Jake Paul, in their media, in their rhetoric, in their policies, and in their politics, what do? They have the most defense, the most apologetics for Assad, for Putin, for Kim even. It was the Libertarian Party of America that put out a video arguing that North Korea had more freedom than America because they did not criminalize marijuana. Now, thoughts are criminalized in North Korea. Speech is criminalized in North Korea. Being a family member of somebody who has the wrong thought is illegal and will get you sent to a concentration camp for 3 generations in North Korea. But weed is legal, of course. So they must be a free utopia. So you can see right now, just off of these few examples, that libertarians are actually very cozy to the idea of a strongman authoritarian dictator. Again, we're living in the era of cringe, right? This is stupid. But there is a chance that at some point one of these people will gain power, and I would like to be on the record calling out their agenda right now. So this might seem gratuitous. Believe me, it's not. It is as unnecessary as making a video warning about communism would have been in 1916. A lot of people would have said, oh, you're crazy if you think the communists are going to kill a bunch of people and set up a totalitarian system. They believe in anarchy. That would never happen. That's what people might have said in 1916. Fast forward to 2019, and we can see that communism has killed close to 200 million people since 1917. So that, right off the bat, is an example where the ideology, the utopia, and the reality of the system are two very different things, of course. So, moving on. With the libertarians now, the vision that I'm going to be laying out here envisages a world in which America pursues a very dark and isolationist path, where an alliance of progressives and libertarians are able to co-opt enough people and are able to, with the support of a hostile axis abroad, namely the government of fascist Russia, they are able to usurp power through the American system. Now, whether this is a wholly democratic process or whether Russia directly meddles and alters votes, that is irrelevant, because the point is they are, in this example, in this world that I'm laying out, they are able to achieve power. Now, maybe this happens in 2028, maybe this happens in 2032, we'll see. But in this example, the year isn't so much as relevant as what proceeds from this, because we need to be aware and we need to be watchful and we need to understand that libertarianism is not benign, but rather a fifth column. And when it comes down to this, upon taking power, the libertarians, they go about pursuing a radically isolationist agenda that sees America not only exit all of the conflicts in the world and whatnot, but simply ceases to participate in any free trade organizations such as NAFTA, in terms of cooperation with the European Union. It sees America become a hermit state like North Korea. It sees America pursue not just economic autarky, but cultural autarky, where anything foreign is ultimately deemed degenerate liberalism and will ultimately be seen as fostering free sexuality and the homosexual agenda and whatnot. And so the media will be very, very much censored. We see in America that goes very much in an almost overnight time span from a free republic to a very dark and isolationist autarky. And we can see this in Turkey, for example, where within 2 years, Turkey went from being a liberal democracy of sorts to becoming a totalitarian system. So it's possible that this happens through a coup of some sort. It's possible that it happens through a rigged election. It is also possible that this happens through a civil war, and that at the end of the day, it is the libertarian militias that prevail. In any case, upon seizing power, we have the libertarian utopia come to fruition. And what we see is that the leader that comes to govern America will ultimately, of course, be a male. It would have to be a male because libertarian sensibilities are ultra-conservative and patriarchal. And so we will see a male succeed and become the president of the United States. The country may have the same name. It will still be the United States of America. But it will no longer hold this role in the world of the guardian of the liberal order. It will pursue a path of allying with the most illiberal systems in the world. But it will not so much maintain this cultural connection and exchange with these countries, but rather just have this lip service to them as brothers in Christendom, as fighting for the same cause for Jesus or whatever. It will have a relationship with Russia and a relationship with North Korea and a relationship with Turkey, much like how Hitler had a relationship with Mussolini. In other words, when push came to shove, they didn't really help each other that much. Or Hitler to Hirohito, where, sure, they both talked a lot about how they both hated America and whatnot, and they both hated the quote-unquote lesser races, but they really didn't interact very much. They weren't an alliance in the sense of what we think of as a cooperative and coordinated effort. It's more a sense of shared sensibilities that you would see. And the people in the United States would only be exposed to domestic media from state television. They wouldn't be seeing things from North Korea or Russia or Syria or Turkey very much, because those things could be seen to weaken the legitimacy and the consolidated power of the nation state of America at this point. And so what we would see then going forward is that, and especially if the power was achieved through a civil war, we would see a situation play out very similar to the Hunger Games, where in the Hunger Games, and there will be a bit of a spoiler here, but in the Hunger Games what happens is you have a leader of what is this autarkic, isolationist America, where the rest of the world doesn't even exist in this universe, in essence, because they're so isolationist. That what happens is the leader, the great leader, the supreme leader of the country at this point, will ultimately pursue more and more radical means of consolidating power and preserving power within his family, within his cadre. And so what you'll see is increasingly states will become more and more divided and bordered from one another. It might very well be the case that in a future libertarian America, if you were born in Utah, you will die in Utah. You will not travel anywhere else unless you have express permission from the party. And the only people that are able to get membership in the Libertarian Party of America would have to be these stellar, standout bootlickers, basically, who have the right pedigree from birth, that are from the right elite families, and they're able to get permission to travel to the capital. But everybody else will be born and die where they stay, just like in North Korea, where if you're born in Pyeongchang province, you're going to die there. If you're born in Chongqing, you're going to die there. You're going to work there the whole time because you are not allowed to enter the capital. The capital is a reserved space for the country's elites. If you are born in Pyongyang, you live in another world from Chongqing, from Sinuiju, from Hamhung, right? So that's what America would become. And what you would see, of course, is the food production would plummet. The electrical production would plummet. There would be a very, very inefficient means of distributing energy, food, etc. Because an efficient distribution of those things, a wearing down of the borders between states, would increase the chances of a rebellion gaining momentum. And so the system would be purposefully inefficient because it's not about making the country more productive. It's about increasing the power of the dear leader. And this is what we would see with the libertarian system, of course, is that, and again, especially if this came about through a civil war, we would see this emphasis upon the state and the president drawing a distinction between the glorious present and the degenerate past. And we would see the president, for example, come out every year on the anniversary of the consolidation of power, and he would wear, say, a purple suit, some UKIP type stuff, like the lunatics over in Britain do, right? Because libertarians, they often will choose things like purple or whatever, which I guess is kind of fitting because purple's also a reactionary color. It's a monarchist color, and a lot of libertarians believe in monarchy. A lot of them see fascism and monarchy as a way of preserving Christendom, a way of preserving a Christian order in the country. They see it as a way of garnering and galvanizing the effect of the church over the state, basically. What we would see, of course, is the president would come out, and what would he talk about? Well, he would give a speech each year on the Capitol, and before him would be, say, 100,000 of his youthlings, right? And they would all bear banners bearing the portraits of course, the dear leader. But as well, we would see Ayn Rand's portrait. We may even see Ron Paul's portrait. We might see, other libertarian type thinkers in there. It's possible that you would even see Milton Friedman, for example. And of course, there would be the portraits of the founding fathers and stuff. They would be appropriated, of course. The image of Jefferson, Franklin, Washington. You would see all the libertarian youth bearing their portraits, and there would be iconography of the Statue of Liberty and all of this other stuff. There would be iconography of capitalism, of free markets, of Adam Smith. But at the end of the day, it's a National Socialist dictatorship. There's nothing free market or capitalist about it at all. And so you would see these kids march in lockstep because they've been training for like 6 months to put up the posters in the right way and to switch and flip them in a coordinated sequence so that it looks like a television screen, right? Which you can see in North Korea, they do this with the Arirang mass games, with the mass demonstrations on the Capitol, on Kim Il-sung Square, where they all hold up everything at the same time and they alternate at the same time so it looks seamless to emphasize the unity of the people, so to speak, which is just a euphemism, of course, for the consolidated power of the leader over the country. And so they would march. They would march and they would sing the praises of the dear leaders. And they would, say things such as, for liberty, for Ayn Rand, and for the dear president, that sort of stuff. And I imagine it being a rainy day, and they would march there with military hardware, and it would look exactly like one of those rallies on Red Square on May Day, for example, where all the Soviet hardware would be paraded publicly and broadcast for the world to see the might of the communist state, right? And we would see this with the libertarian system. And this parade would be broadcast over and over into the television screens of the country to the population scattered throughout these isolated states. And what we would see in the speech is the president in his purple suit. He would come out and talk about the degeneracy of the past. He would talk about how America used to be riddled with and afflicted by this scourge of feminism, of things such as, the homosexual agenda, atheism, etc. He would have a laundry list of things that America used to be, quote unquote, plagued by. And then he would proceed to ultimately glorify and romanticize the war or the seizure of power that got the libertarian system consolidated. And then he would proceed to announce, as I would see it, this basically this death match between selected individuals throughout the country to compete to the death for the glory of their families. And I would see it as basically what would happen. At this point, it's probably the year 2065, 2070. The president's been in power for 30, 40 years or whatever. And he announces, the 40th or the 38th, annual, libertarian liberty match or whatever. I don't know what he would call it. But it would essentially consist of the best gamers in the country competing against one another in some match of whatever the online game is at the time. Whatever it is probably glorifies, Roman aesthetics and whatnot from ancient Rome. And they compete online. So unlike the Hunger Games, right, where they're actually competing with weapons and stuff in physical strength, I imagine that a libertarian dictatorship would just emphasize the gamers so much more, right? That it would so much be more focused around this neckbeardy internet culture and whatnot. And even though the internet by and large would be banned in this system, you would still see that there would be a national sport and it would be a game online or whatever, or it would be played through a landline or whatever. The thing is, we would see here, of course, that however many kids it is, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 30, they would be brought to the Capitol and they would all play this game against one another. Think of it as Fortnite or something, but libertarian Fortnite. And 29 of them and their families are going to the gulags or they're going to get executed. But one of them gets to live in the Capitol. One of them gets, all this wealth and everything brought upon them. And the president speaks and he mentions how, it's about the glory of the country. It's about the glory of Ayn Rand. It's about the glory of the human power of will. And he has all this aesthetics in the background of flames burning, of the social Darwinist spirit and the portraits of Ayn Rand and the iconography of the Statue of Liberty and the American flag. And of course his portrait in larger than life size. What happens is they compete and we see publicly after the parade is over and the games have been commenced, we see that the losers are promptly taken out and we see the secret police come in. They take out the losers as they go down in the match of this battle royale. Again, think of it like a libertarian Fortnite or something, a futuristic sort of game. Maybe it's even virtual reality, but whatever it is, there would be this emphasis on, the gamer culture and everything, because that's what libertarians are obsessed with. You would see in the speech, of course, before this commenced, you would see the speech by the president talking about Gamergate and how America used to be overrun by feminists. But now all the feminists are either in camps or have been executed and their families have been shot in ditches. And so there's this glorious patriarchal revival in America. That's what you would see. And And he would conclude his speech by saying, this is for the glory of the gamers and the glory of Ayn Rand, and he would have some sort of hashtag Gamergate thing going on in the background, even though by that point it's 50 years on since Gamergate started. And I imagine that the president is probably a neckbeard as well, right, in a purple suit. The thing is, we see the winner, of course, after the other 29 are down and have been shot and their families sent to the gulags. And mind you, again, this libertarian America, a lot of the country is going to be in gulags throughout. There would be a gulag archipelago of America if libertarians ever got power. And there would be a copy of Jordan Peterson in every home. There would be a copy of Ayn Rand in every home. There would be a copy of Ron Paul's works in every home by law. But there would also be gulags everywhere. Labor camps, forced labor camps. And I imagine that a lot of the prisoners there would die of starvation very quickly, like North Korea. And the system would be very inefficient at producing food. And there would be these mass state corporate entities like the Chaebol in South Korea or the Keiretsu in Japan, except on an even more maniacal scale, because it's libertarianism, and the monopolies would be just so much more consolidated, and they would have so much more power, and you would basically see yourself as serving the corporate CEO, serving the president, and serving God. Those would be like the three pillars of what this society would be founded upon. And there'd be this aestheticized gamer culture throughout, where sure, the internet is banned, you're not allowed to get information, but you are able to hone your skills on this libertarian Fortnite type thing, right? And so what we see is that the leader, he comes out and announces and stands with the victor of the libertarian Fortnite game, and he comes out and he presents to him some sort of trophy of some sort, some big golden trophy bearing, aesthetics of the Statue of Liberty, of ancient Rome, perhaps even Nazi Germany, and with this sense that you are the embodiment of what it means to be a good white man and everything. And there would be this mass celebration, of course, and the whole society, in essence, the only people that would be allowed to live in the capital would, of course, be white. That would just be a given, of course, because it's a libertarian society. So, of course, the ruling elites would be white supremacists. And what we see is that this guy, him and his family, they're all, happy, and they're all like, great job. This is an American, this is an American feel-good story. He won the lottery. He worked hard. He won the games. He slayed the other 29 rivals in the games, and now they're shot in a ditch, rotting away with earthworms and stuff, and their families are becoming emaciated in labor camps. But it's all about the glory of this one gamer who bears the spirit of Ayn Rand. Because, mind you, Ayn Rand didn't even have sympathy for infants, right? If an infant is weak and gets killed, that's totally cool. So you can see how this society gets very dark very fast. By this point, of course, all the Jews are executed. All the blacks and whatever are in labor camps, right? There is no feminist movement whatsoever. They were all executed a long time ago. You would see America basically go on through the centuries, looking identical to North Korea, looking identical to the Soviet Union, and this would happen every year. And what you would see is an increasingly consolidated family around the great leader, who his son's son, they all bear and pay lip service to the ideas of Ayn Rand. And this goes on in perpetuity. And this sort of system could last a very long time, because unlike in the case of when Saddam tried this sort of thing, unlike in the case of even Kim today, this leader would not live in fear, because America is the last bastion of intervention in the world. And if America went down this route, there would be no fear, because nobody else is going to intervene. And in this scenario that I'm laying out here, it looks a lot like the Hunger Games, because the rest of the world really doesn't exist at this point. Nobody's going to take on America. America still has the huge military and everything. It just happens to be a totalitarian, libertarian dystopia. Nobody's going to challenge. Nobody's going to stop them. And even if Russia became this liberal democracy or something, they wouldn't do it, because America would still have all these thousands of nukes and this huge military force. And so for the people of America, the rest of the world might not as well exist. They would be living on a small moon, to borrow a phrase from Christopher Hitchens. When he went to North Korea, he described it as being on a small moon, because there is no connection to the rest of the world. The rest of the world might as well be 500 million miles away, right? So that's let's just be clear here. This is the libertarian agenda for America. When Rand dumber than Jake Paul, when he goes out there and defends Assad and defends Iran and defends Putin, he's not doing it because he believes in free markets or anything. He's doing it because he believes in an ultra-conservative patriarchal theocracy and a dictatorship. This is what all these libertarians believe in. I've gotten into arguments with them in the past. Some of them have been more, what I would argue, or characterize as clean-shaven. Others have been more neckbeard and more vulgar. But their sensibilities are all like. They all believe in the whole Roosh thing. They all believe in the Jordan Peterson stuff. They all believe that women are lesser. They all embrace Schopenhauer. They all embrace Jung. They all embrace Freud. They all embrace the most patriarchal elements of the last 200 years. And they also embrace the most patriarchal elements of the previous millennia. They all embrace this rabid sense of Christian identitarianism. And they all embrace this sense of ultimately that the separation of church and state is this degenerate leftist idea or whatever. They are all more or less reactionary. They all more or less flirt with fascism. And they would all come around to having a supreme leader like this. This vision that I'm laying out here, it would not be some lone family who everybody in the country despises. No, there would be a cadre of support around him. And it would consist of the original Gamergate type people that would go on and become part of this. I mean, imagine Milo Yiannopoulos. Imagine Alex Jones. Imagine all of these people, right? In this scenario that I'm laying out here, where it really starts in the 2030s, those people would still be alive, and they would have positions in the first few administrations, the first few dictatorships, or the first few supreme rulers. But this system would go on, and I imagine that by the year 25 or 2600, when we're on the 400th edition of this Libertarian Fortnite match, right? The graphics, everything would probably still look fairly similar. The TVs would all look more or less similar, because those societies don't move forward. North Korea, all these systems, these autarkic systems, they really do not move forward. In other words, the year 2070 in this country, in this vision of America, would have basically the same technology, the same culture, the same everything, the same politics, the same discourse as America in the year 2570. It wouldn't change in half a millennium. It just simply wouldn't, because these systems are incapable of change. They are inherently conservative and reactionary and view change as degenerate. And this system would ultimately continue on and on and on. And they may have some innovations in their military, but they would not have the only innovations would be in making the system even more inefficient to preserve the power of the dear leaders and make it even harder to stoke a rebellion. And this would go on and on and on and on and on and on. It would be a Westphalian nightmare. It would look like Syria, basically. And it would look like North Korea. It would look like the Soviet Union. And yet it would call itself libertarian. All of the banners throughout all the cities and towns in the country would have slogans and billboards saying, fighting for liberty, and show portraits of Jefferson, Ayn Rand, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, and of course the supreme leaders of the country. standing side by side in the same way that those portraits and banners of Stalin, Mao, Marx, Engels side by side. It would look exactly like a communist dystopia. Now, let us be clear, of course. What I've just laid out here for you is a nightmarish vision, and you might say, well, you might be skeptical that these libertarians and whatnot that we see today would really get around this. Well, I simply asked you, show me a dictatorship going on in the world right now that they don't support. They actively support Bolsonaro. Dave Rubin has endorsed Bolsonaro. Think about that, right? This man who sees any taxation as too authoritarian, too big government. He's totally fine killing gays. He's totally fine giving helicopter rides to gays, right? Now, he himself is gay. Then again, he himself is an atheist. But he has all the sensibilities and all the pretenses and all the ideology of a rabid Christian fundamentalist. And this goes on and on and on. I could talk about Molyneux. I could talk about lackluster Lawrence Southern. I can go on and on and on. Again, every single time, there's this emphasis, this sensibility around, this on-Randian aesthetic, coupled with this Jordan Peterson type, Arthur Schopenhauer type, patriarchal, biblically infused misogyny. And they would all get around this system. They would all be cheerleaders for the Supreme Leader. And the Supreme Leader would have some of them executed, of course, because they would be seen as rivals for power. But once power is consolidated, they would all sing praise. They would all sing praise, 100%. They would all get around and bootleg for the dear leader because they do it with foreign dictators right now. To me, it is not a stretch of the imagination to believe that Molyneux, Southern, Rubin, the Pauls, etc., would instantly be cheerleaders for an American equivalent of Assad or Kim or Putin. To me, that is wholly logical. And so I thank you for watching, YouTube. I welcome any comments and feedback. I'm curious to know what you think about this. If you disagree, if you agree with me, if you have alternate visions of how a libertarian agenda might play out for America, if you think it might even be more totalitarian or less, or if you think it might be more capitalist than this, or if you agree that it would basically be a state corporate monopoly, let me know. Maybe you think it would be more atheistic. I personally believe that an American libertarian dystopia would have a national church. It would be officially Christian, and it would be basically a Christian Soviet Union. That's kind of how I imagine the libertarian vision for America playing out. But I'm curious to know what you think. And so thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I know this video is running on about 40 minutes right now, but I do definitely appreciate you watching this, and I thank you for the support and your time in viewing this. So thank you, YouTube.